The salt cellar was 3 inches closer to her plate than it had been yesterday. Aundrea noticed. Her husband, Jun, the man who controlled every port from Savannah to Norfolk, didn't. She watched his hand hover over the crystal decanter, over the imported cigars, over the leather ledger she'd been forbidden to touch. 4 inches. That's all the space between her and the documents that proved he killed her brother. 4 inches to decide whether to stay silent and survive, or reach across the table and end everything. She reached. Not for the ledger, for her wineglass, and she smiled. But here's what nobody at that table knew. Not June, scrolling through his phone like she was furniture. Not his mother, the Iron Lady, watching from across the table with those falcon eyes. Not even the lieutenant sitting 2 seats down, the one whose cufflinks still had her brother's blood on them. Aundrea didn't smile because she was happy. She smiled because she'd already won, and they were too busy ignoring her to see it coming. You ever notice something's wrong before anyone else does? That moment when your gut screams at you but nobody around you hears it? That's where Aundrea was. Sitting at a table worth more than most people's houses, surrounded by men in Tom Ford suits, drowning in the smell of mahogany and expensive lies. Her husband's hand moved toward the contracts, the same hand that used to hold hers, the same hand that signed off on her brother's death 6 months ago. She had maybe 5 seconds. 5 seconds to decide if she was going to keep playing the role of the good wife, the invisible wife, the wife who knew her place, or if she was finally going to stop pretending she didn't know what he'd done. She reached across that table, past the salt, past the shame, and she picked up her glass of wine like she'd just made the easiest decision of her life. Because here's the thing nobody tells you about being invisible. When people stop seeing you, they stop watching you too, and that's when you become dangerous. This is Aundrea, 30 years old, political strategist turned syndicate wife, daughter of a South Carolina legacy, granddaughter of the man who funded June's empire before it even had a name. For 3 years, she'd held this fractured world together. Managed the Charleston estate, translated June's cold business language into something his traditional mother could tolerate. Smoothed over the tensions when the northern factions questioned his judgment. She was good at it, so good that everyone stopped noticing her doing it. June ran a criminal empire, important work, dangerous work, work that required absolute focus, so Aundrea became background, competent, useful, essential, and completely erased. Tonight, at this family dinner in the heart of a city built on secrets, that erasure is about to be the last mistake June ever makes. In the private dining room of the Jun family estate, mahogany and marble, the smell of leather-bound books and cigar smoke that never quite leaves the curtains. Crystal glasses catching the low light from the chandelier overhead, each one positioned exactly 4 inches from the plate's edge. Precision, control, the illusion of order. Left side of the table, Aundrea, 30 years old. Silk red dress purchased by her own money. Not June's assistant, not this time. Hands folded, posture immaculate. The portrait of a woman who knows how to be invisible in a room full of predators. Center, Jun. Everyone calls him untouchable. Sharp jaw, tattoo crawling up his neck, fresh ink from last week, some symbol she wasn't invited to understand. Black suit, phone out. Scrolling through shipping manifests during what's supposed to be a family meal. Not unusual. He'd answered emails during her brother's funeral too. Right side, June's younger brother, Seo Yoon. Navy suit, sweating even though the estate's air conditioning keeps the room at exactly 68 degrees. He keeps glancing at the door like he's expecting someone, or running from someone. And at the head of the table, Bo Yoon, the matriarch, 70 years old, burgundy Chanel, silver hair pulled so tight it looks like a weapon. She doesn't speak English at family dinners, refuses to. Even though Aundrea knows she's fluent, it's a power move. Exclusion as an art form. This is how power arranges itself in Charleston's criminal elite. This is the geometry of a family that looks untouchable from the outside. From the inside, it's already crumbling. They just don't know it yet. For 3 years, Aundrea had been the family's shock absorber, softening Bo Yoon's razor-sharp criticisms when she questioned June's too American approach, translating June's ruthless pragmatism into something that looked like affection for the outside world, standing in for him at charity galas when he was handling business. She was good at reading rooms. Had to be. Tonight, she was reading everything. The accountant, Mr. Cho, sitting 3 seats down, kept checking his watch. The same watch June's lieutenant had been wearing last month before he disappeared. The same lieutenant who'd been at the docks the night her brother's car went into the harbor. June's hand moved toward the folder at his elbow. The red one. The one she wasn't supposed to know about. The one with her family's shipping routes inside. Aundrea's fingers tightened around the stem of her glass, just slightly, not enough for anyone to notice. Because that's the thing about being invisible for 3 years. You learn to move in the spaces between people's attention. You learn where the cameras are, where the ledgers are kept, whose loyalty is for sale. And you learn exactly how to destroy a man who thought you were too insignificant to fear. Before we dive into how Aundrea dismantled an entire criminal empire from the inside, I need to know, are you Team Aundrea or Team June? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button because this story has 8 plot twists that will leave you speechless. Now let's see what happened next. The dinner stretched on like a knife across skin. Slow, deliberate, painful. Aundrea brought her wine glass to her lips but didn't drink. She let the rim rest there, cold crystal against warm flesh, while she watched June's reflection in the polished mahogany. He was still on his phone, still scrolling, still pretending she didn't exist in a dress designed to demand attention. The red silk clung to her like a second skin, cut low enough to be defiant, high enough to maintain the illusion of propriety. She'd chosen it specifically for tonight, for this moment. Because invisible women don't wear red. And Aundrea was done being invisible. "Seo-yoon," June said without looking up from his screen, his voice carrying that particular flatness he reserved for family obligations, the manifest from the Norfolk shipment. "You reviewed it?" Seo-yoon's fork scraped against porcelain. A small sound, a guilty sound. Yes. Everything's accounted for." Liar. Aundrea saw it in the way his jaw tightened, the way his eyes cut to Mr. Cho before darting away. She'd learned to read lies the way some women read romance novels, hungrily, obsessively, because her survival depended on it. Bo-yoon spoke then, rapid Korean that Aundrea understood perfectly despite the charade they all performed. "The American wife is too quiet tonight. Has she finally learned her place, or is she plotting something?" June's mother smiled when she said it, the kind of smile that drew blood. "Perhaps," Bo-yoon continued, gesturing vaguely in Aundrea's direction without actually looking at her, "she is simply bored. American women are not built for the patience this life requires. They want everything loud, immediate, cheap." The insult hung in the air like smoke. June didn't defend her. He never did. He just reached for his wine, his fingers, those same fingers that used to trace patterns on her spine in the dark, curling around the glass with mechanical precision. Aundrea set her own glass down, gently, the kind of gentle that costs everything to maintain. "I'm not bored," she said in perfect Korean, her accent flawless, each syllable a small detonation. "I'm calculating." The table went still. Bo-yoon's eyes finally landed on her, sharp, assessing, the look of a woman who'd survived 5 decades in this world by knowing which threats to eliminate and which to ignore. "Calculating what, child?" Aundrea smiled. Not the smile of a wife seeking approval, the smile of a chess player who'd just sacrificed a pawn to reveal the queen. The distance between silence and strategy. "I've found they're often mistaken for each other." June's phone hit the table with a dull thud. He looked at her then, actually looked, and something moved behind those eyes. Surprise, maybe, or the first flicker of suspicion. But it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by that mask of controlled indifference he wore like armor. "You're feeling poetic tonight," he said, his English crisp, dismissive. "Maybe you should lie down. You've been stressed lately." Stressed, as if her brother's death 6 months ago was just a bout of feminine hysteria. As if she hadn't seen the autopsy report that didn't match the accident narrative. As if she hadn't found the encrypted messages on June's laptop the week after the funeral. "I'm fine," Aundrea replied, switching back to English, her voice honey over broken glass. "But thank you for your concern, husband. It's been so long since you've noticed me long enough to worry." The barb landed. She saw it in the way his jaw flexed, the way his fingers tightened around the wineglass. Seo-yoon coughed. Mr. Cho studied his plate like it held the secrets of the universe. Bo-yoon's smile widened. She has teeth after all. How unexpected. June stood abruptly, his chair scraping against hardwood. "Excuse me, I have a call to make." He didn't wait for permission, didn't look back. just walked out of the dining room with that confident stride of a man who believed he was untouchable. Aundrea watched him go, counted his steps, 12 to the doorway, then the soft click of his study door closing, the study where he kept all his secrets. The study she'd been inside 3 times this week while he slept. The study where she'd photographed every document, every ledger, every piece of evidence that proved June hadn't just inherited an empire, he'd stolen it, from her family, from her. "You should be careful," Bo-yoon said quietly, switching to English now, her voice like silk wrapped around a blade. "My son is not a patient man, and patient men can be taught. But men like June—" She paused, her gaze sliding over Aundrea with cool assessment. "Men like June simply eliminate what frustrates them. Is that a threat? It's a kindness. Woman to woman." Aundrea met the matriarch's eyes and didn't flinch. "Then woman to woman, let me offer you one in return. The men in this family have mistaken my silence for submission. That's going to cost them everything." She stood then, her red dress catching the light, and walked out of the dining room with her head high and her heart hammering against her ribs. Behind her, she heard Seo-yoon whisper something in Korean, something that sounded like a prayer or a warning. Aundrea smiled. Let them pray. The diamond earrings sat in their velvet box like promises or lies. Aundrea couldn't remember which anymore. June had given them to her on their first anniversary. "For my wife," he'd said, his voice warm then, back when he still said her name like it meant something. "So everyone knows you belong to me." Belong. Such a loaded word. Such a revealing word. She lifted one earring now, feeling its weight in her palm. 3 carats. Flawless. The kind of stones that whispered old money and new blood. The kind that made other women stare and wonder what it cost to be loved by a man like Tan-jun. If they only knew. The bathroom mirror reflected a woman Aundrea barely recognized anymore. Same face, same dark skin that glowed like polished mahogany in the soft lighting. Same full lips and sharp cheekbones. But the eyes had changed. They'd learned to hide things, to calculate, to survive. She fastened the first earring, then the second. To anyone else they were just diamonds. Beautiful, expensive, meaningless. To Aundrea, they were weapons. The modifications had been subtle, almost invisible. It had taken her 3 visits to that jeweler in Colombia, the one who didn't ask questions, who worked in the back room where the smell of solder and secrets mixed, to get them right. Directional microphones, built into the setting. Audio feeds that uploaded directly to an encrypted server only she could access. For 6 months, she'd worn them to every family dinner, every business meeting June conducted in their home, every whispered conversation in the study he thought was private. For 6 months, she'd been recording everything. And now she had a library of evidence that could destroy not just June, but his entire network, every shipping route, every payoff, every body that disappeared into the Carolina marshes, including her brothers. The bedroom door opened behind her. She didn't turn, didn't need to. She knew the sound of Jun's footsteps, heavy, confident. The walk of a man who'd never had to question his place in the world. "You were rude tonight," he said, his reflection appearing behind hers in the mirror. His tie was loosened, his jacket gone. He looked almost human like this, almost vulnerable. Almost like the man she'd thought she was marrying. "Was I?" Aundrea's fingers moved to her neck, adjusting the thin gold chain she wore. "I thought I was honest." Sometimes people confuse the two. June moved closer, close enough that she could feel the heat of him at her back. Close enough that the scent of his cologne, sandalwood, and something darker, something that reminded her of expensive lies, wrapped around her like smoke. His hand came to rest on her shoulder, heavy, possessive. "My mother doesn't appreciate your new attitude. Your mother doesn't appreciate me breathing. This is hardly news." His fingers tightened, not enough to hurt, just enough to remind her of his strength, of the implicit threat that had always lived in the space between them, even back when she'd been naive enough to call it love. Aundrea. Her name in his mouth sounded like a warning. "I don't know what's gotten into you lately, but you need to remember who you are, who we are. There are rules in this family, roles. And mine is to be silent. Your role is to be my wife. There's a difference." She turned then, forcing him to step back or maintain the contact. He stepped back, always did when confronted directly. June preferred his power subtle, atmospheric. The kind that suffocated slowly rather than struck fast. Is there? Aundrea asked, her voice soft, dangerous. Because from where I'm standing, being your wife looks a lot like being a stranger you occasionally fuck when the mood strikes. Something flashed in his eyes. Anger, yes, but something else too. Something that might have been desire if she cared enough to name it. Careful, he said, his voice dropping to that register he used in the bedroom. The one that used to make her pulse quicken for all the wrong reasons. You're playing a dangerous game. Am I playing? She stepped closer, invading his space the way he'd invaded hers, her red dress a slash of defiance between them. Or am I finally showing you who I've been all along? For a moment, just a moment, something raw crossed his face. Confusion. Recognition. The dawning awareness that the woman in front of him wasn't the woman he'd married. Or maybe she was, and he'd just never bothered to look closely enough to notice. His hand came up, fingers grazing her jaw with something that might have been tenderness if either of them still believed in such things. Who are you? He whispered, the question hanging between them like an admission of failure. Aundrea smiled, leaned into his touch just enough to feel the roughness of his palm, the heat of his skin. Then she pulled back, the loss of contact deliberate, surgical. I'm your wife, she said simply. Just like you wanted. The question is, Jun, do you even remember what you asked for? She walked past him, her shoulder brushing his chest, and felt the tremor that ran through him at the contact. Hunger, confusion. The toxic mixture of desire and distrust that had become the foundation of everything between them. At the bedroom door, she paused. The matriarch was right about one thing tonight. I have been calculating. And June? She glanced back, her diamond earrings catching the light, recording every breath, every word, every damning second. The equation doesn't end well for you. She left him standing there, and didn't look back to see if her words had landed. She already knew they had. The woman's name was Yuna Park, and she sat too close to June in every meeting. Aundrea noticed because noticing had become her survival mechanism. The way Yuna's hand would brush June's arm when making a point. The way she laughed at his statements that weren't jokes. The way June's body language shifted when she entered a room, subtle, almost imperceptible, but there. Most wives would have been threatened, would have seen a mistress in the making. Aundrea saw an opportunity. The weekly financial review happened every Thursday at 2 p.m. in June's study. Aundrea wasn't invited, had never been invited, but she'd learned that locked doors were just suggestions when you knew where the spare keys were kept. Today, she stood in the hallway outside the study, her ear pressed against the mahogany, listening. The northern roots are bleeding, Yuna's voice, crisp and professional. Someone skimming, small amounts, almost invisible, but over 6 months, papers rustling. It adds up to nearly 2 million. June's response was ice. Find them. I'm trying. But whoever's doing this knows the system, knows exactly how much they can take before triggering audits. Then they're inside. A pause. Then Yuna, quieter. That's what concerns me. Aundrea smiled against the door. She'd been counting on this. The false trail she'd been laying for 3 months, tiny discrepancies, carefully placed breadcrumbs that led nowhere and everywhere at once, was working exactly as planned. What about the Charleston accounts? June asked. Clean. But, another pause. Longer this time. June, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. The shift in tone made Aundrea press closer. This wasn't business anymore. This was personal. The Lee family shipping contracts, the ones you acquired last year after the accident. I've been reviewing the timing and… That's not your concern. June's voice had gone flat, dangerous. I'm your accountant. Everything is my concern. If there's exposure, there isn't. But if someone looks closely… No one is looking, Yuna. No one is asking questions. The contracts are legal. The accident was tragic. That's the end of it. The Lee family. Aundrea's family. Her brother's shipping routes that had mysteriously transferred to June 3 weeks after the funeral. The timing had always been suspicious. Now she had confirmation that even June's own accountant saw the blood in the water. She pulled back from the door, her mind racing. Yuna Park wasn't just an accountant. She was a loose thread, the kind that, when pulled correctly, could unravel everything. Aundrea needed to pull it. 3 days later, Aundrea sat in a wine bar in downtown Charleston, the kind of place where business was conducted in whispers and everyone minded their own damage. Una Park walked in at exactly 6:15 p.m., just like the anonymous text had suggested. She looked around, confused, clearly expecting someone else. Aundrea raised her hand. "Miss Park, thank you for coming." Una's confusion shifted to something harder. "Mrs. June, I didn't realize you were." "Sit," Aundrea gestured to the empty chair. "Please, I promise this won't take long." Una sat, but her body language screamed suspicion. "Smart woman, does your husband know you're here?" "My husband doesn't know a lot of things. That's what I wanted to talk to you about." A server appeared, was waved away. The air between them felt charged, dangerous. "I'm not having an affair with him," Una said bluntly. "If that's what this is—" "I know you're not." Aundrea leaned forward, her voice dropping. "But I also know you're not just his accountant. You're a plant. Northern Syndicate, right? How long have you been feeding information to the Kim family?" The color drained from Una's face. "Don't panic," Aundrea continued smoothly. "I'm not here to expose you. I'm here to make you an offer." "What kind of offer?" Aundrea pulled a USB drive from her purse, set it on the table between them like a chess piece. "On this drive is evidence that June has been systematically embezzling from his own operation for 3 years. Offshore accounts, shell companies, money laundering that would make the feds very interested. If this information reached your employers," she let the implication hang. Una's eyes fixed on the drive. "You're lying." "Am I?" "Your own audit showed someone was skimming. You suspected it might be internal. You were right. You just accused the wrong person." "June wouldn't." "June absolutely would. He inherited this operation, but he's always resented sharing power with the other families. What better way to consolidate control than to slowly bleed them dry while pointing fingers elsewhere?" It was a beautiful lie, the kind that fit perfectly with the false trail Aundrea had been laying for months, the kind that would survive scrutiny just long enough to serve its purpose. Una's hand moved toward the drive, then stopped. "Why are you doing this? He's your husband." "He was my husband. Now he's just a man who made a mistake, a fatal one." Aundrea stood, leaving the drive on the table. "You can take that back to your employers. Tell them you found it hidden in June's study. Be the hero. Get your promotion. Or—" She paused at Una's shoulder, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You can ignore it and wait for June to figure out you're a spy. Your choice. But choose quickly, Miss Park. The clock is ticking, and June doesn't handle betrayal well." She walked out of the wine bar without looking back. Behind her, she knew Una was staring at the USB drive, her mind racing through possibilities, loyalties, survival calculations. Aundrea had done the same calculus 6 months ago when she'd found the truth about her brother. She knew exactly what Una would choose. The low-country estate sat like a ghost at the edge of the marsh, all crumbling brick and faded grandeur. Aundrea's grandfather had built it in the 1960s when money still smelled like tobacco and cotton instead of blood and cocaine. She'd avoided this place for 3 years. Too many memories, too much history. But now, standing in the overgrown driveway with the smell of pluff, mud, and decay in her lungs, Aundrea realized this was exactly where she needed to be. The front door hung crooked on its hinges. Inside, dust motes danced in the afternoon light filtering through broken windows, furniture draped in white sheets like corpses. The house felt like a mausoleum for a version of her family that no longer existed. Aundrea made her way to the study, her grandfather's study, where the old man had conducted business back when the family's empire was still respectable, still clean. Before June. The filing cabinet in the corner looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. The lock was rusted, but it gave way easily when she applied the right pressure. Inside, folders yellowed with age. Contracts, deeds, letters written in her grandfather's careful handwriting. And there, at the very back, a leather portfolio that looked newer than everything else. Aundrea's hands trembled as she opened it. The documents inside were dated 30 years ago. Articles of incorporation for the June family syndicate, partnership agreements, operating clauses that outlined how the business would be structured, how profits would be shared, how power would be transferred. And there, on page 17 of the founding documents, a clause she'd never seen before, legacy protection provision. In the event of demonstrable hostile action by any signatory family against the bloodline of the original capital provider, Lee family, all assets, contracts, and territorial rights shall immediately revert to Lee family control, effective upon legal documentation of said hostile action. Aundrea read it 3 times, then a 4th. Her grandfather hadn't just funded Jun's family empire, he'd built in a kill switch, insurance, a way to take it all back if the Juns ever forgot who'd made them powerful in the first place. She pulled out her phone, photographed every page, every signature, her grandfather's, Jun's father's, the witnesses, the notary stamps. It was all legal, all binding, all hers. The hostile action clause was clear. Demonstrable hostile action could mean a lot of things, but the death of her brother, Jun's calculated move to seize the Lee family shipping routes, that definitely qualified. She just needed to prove it. Good thing she'd been recording everything for 6 months. Aundrea stood in that dusty study, holding documents that would rewrite everything, and felt something shift inside her. Not rage anymore, not even grief. Cold purpose. Jun had treated her like a stranger, like a political ornament that had outlived its usefulness. He'd killed her brother to expand his empire, then expected her to play the obedient wife. He'd miscalculated. Because Aundrea hadn't been playing house for 3 years, she'd been preparing for war. And in 3 weeks, at the winter gala, she would watch him realize exactly what he'd lost when he stopped seeing her as a threat. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. USB delivered. Northern families very interested. Meeting next week. Y.P. Yuna had made her choice. Aundrea smiled, tucking the portfolio under her arm. Everything was falling into place. The audio recordings, the false financial trail pointing to Jun's supposed embezzlement. Yuna's testimony that would fracture the syndicate's trust. And now this, the legacy clause, the legal foundation that would let her strip everything from Jun without firing a single shot. She walked out of that crumbling estate feeling lighter than she had in years. The ghosts of her family's past no longer felt like haunting. They felt like reinforcements. Outside, the marsh stretched toward the horizon, endless and patient. Just like Aundrea's revenge. She drove back to Charleston with the sun setting behind her, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. Somewhere in the city ahead, Jun was probably in his study, reviewing shipping routes, making plans, consolidating power, completely unaware that his wife, the stranger at his table, had just activated a trap 3 decades in the making. Aundrea turned on the radio, some old jazz standard about love and loss. She hummed along. In 3 weeks the music would stop, and Jun would finally learn to see her, right before she destroyed him. The winter gala was 3 hours away, and Aundrea could already taste the blood in the water. She stood in front of the full-length mirror in their bedroom, watching herself transform into the woman Jun expected to see, hair swept up in an elegant twist, makeup flawless, bronze and gold that made her dark skin luminous against the deep burgundy of her gown. The dress was custom, silk that clung like a promise or a threat, cut high enough to be elegant, low enough to remind everyone in that ballroom exactly what Jun possessed. Except he didn't possess her anymore. He just didn't know it yet. The diamond earrings caught the light as she fastened them, her secret weapons, her confession booth. For 6 months they'd been recording every whispered threat, every calculated murder, every admission of guilt that Jun had made in rooms he thought were safe. Tonight, those recordings would play on a screen 40 feet wide. Her phone sat on the vanity, the upload command queued and ready. 1 tap. That's all it would take to detonate Jun's entire world. The bedroom door opened. Jun stepped through, already dressed in his tuxedo, black on black, sharp enough to cut. He stopped when he saw her, his expression shifting through something she couldn't quite name, appreciation, possession. That particular hunger he got when he remembered she was his wife and not just furniture. "You look," he didn't finish, just moved closer, his eyes tracking the curve of her neck, the line of her collarbone, the place where the dress dipped low enough to be dangerous. "Acceptable?" Aundrea offered, her voice neutral. "Devastating." The word hung between them like smoke. He reached out, his fingers grazing her bare shoulder, and she felt the familiar electricity of his touch. The thing that had drawn her to him in the beginning, back when she'd been naive enough to think power and love were the same thing. His hand slid down her arm, slow and deliberate, leaving heat in its wake. "I want you to stay close to me tonight. The northern families will be there. Things are tense." "Because of the money that's been disappearing?" His fingers tightened on her wrist. Just slightly. You've been listening to gossip. I've been listening to you, June. You talk in your sleep sometimes. Did you know that? She turned to face him fully, close enough now that she could feel his breath, smell the expensive cologne that couldn't quite mask the scent of violence that clung to him like a second skin. You say interesting things. Names, numbers, locations. Something dangerous moved behind his eyes. What exactly did I say? Aundrea smiled, reaching up to adjust his bow tie even though it didn't need adjusting. Just an excuse to touch him, to feel the way his pulse jumped at her fingertips, to remind him that she could be soft and sharp at the same time. Nothing I didn't already know, she whispered, her lips close enough to his that she felt him lean in, drawn by muscle memory and masculine instinct. But it's sweet that you're worried. She pulled back before their mouths could meet, leaving him suspended in that space between desire and frustration. His jaw clenched. His hand came up to cup her face, rougher than necessary, and she let him. Let him feel like he was still in control. Don't play games with me tonight, Aundrea. I'm not in the mood. Who said I was playing? For a moment, they stood locked in that tension, his thumb tracing her bottom lip, her hand pressed flat against his chest where she could feel his heart racing. The air between them felt combustible. Dangerous in the way that made you lean in instead of back. Then his phone buzzed. The spell broke. He stepped away, checking the screen, his face shifting back to business. The car's here. Let's go. Aundrea picked up her clutch. Small, elegant, containing nothing but lipstick and the phone that would end him. After you, husband. She followed him out, and with every step down the hallway, she felt the weight of what was coming. In 3 hours, June would be standing on a stage giving a speech about loyalty and legacy. And she would press a button that would show everyone in that ballroom exactly what kind of man they'd been following. The man who'd killed her brother, the man who'd stolen her family's empire, the man who'd turned his wife into a ghost because he couldn't imagine she'd ever haunt him back. The Grand Charleston ballroom looked like something out of a fever dream. All gold and burgundy, crystal chandeliers throwing fractured light across a sea of expensive suits and dangerous smiles. The city's criminal elite, dressed up and playing pretend, acting like they were legitimate businessmen instead of the wolves they actually were. Aundrea stood at June's side, his hand possessive at the small of her back, and watched the predators circle each other with champagne and false pleasantries. Mrs. June. A voice like gravel. She turned to find one of the Northern family heads. Park something, she couldn't remember, extending his hand. You look radiant tonight. Thank you. She shook his hand, felt the way he held on just a second too long. Testing, measuring. Your husband is a lucky man, though I hear luck has been inconsistent lately. June's hand tightened on her back. Business is business, Mr. Park. Some years are better than others. Of course, of course. But Park's eyes stayed on Aundrea, sharp and calculating. I only mention it because my accountant has been reviewing some interesting discrepancies. Numbers that don't quite add up. I'm sure it's nothing, but in our line of work, he smiled. All teeth, no warmth. Well, we can't afford loose ends. There are no loose ends, June said flatly. Good, good. Park drifted away, but not before throwing one last look at Aundrea. A look that said he knew something, or suspected something, or wanted June to think he did. The game had begun. Aundrea's phone sat heavy in her clutch. 15 minutes until June's speech. 15 minutes until everything changed. That was hostile, she murmured. It's always hostile. They're testing me. Looking for weakness. June's voice was cold, controlled. The voice of a man who'd learned to hide everything behind ice. They think the missing money makes me vulnerable. Does it? He looked down at her then, his expression unreadable. No, because I didn't take it, which means someone else did. And when I find them, he didn't finish, didn't need to. The threat hung in the air between them, clear as crystal. Aundrea felt a spike of something electric. Fear, excitement, the razor's edge between the two. What if you're looking in the wrong place? She asked softly. Meaning? Meaning sometimes the threat isn't outside. Sometimes it's right next to you, so close you stop seeing it altogether. June's eyes narrowed. Is this about us? About how I've been treating you? Is it? The music shifted. A string quartet starting up in the corner, the opening notes of something classical and ominous. Around them, Couples began moving toward the dance floor. June held out his hand. Not a request, a command. Dance with me. Aundrea placed her hand in his, let him pull her into the crowd of swaying bodies. His arm came around her waist, drawing her close enough that she could feel the hard lines of him, the tension coiled in his muscles. They moved together with the ease of 3 years' practice, their bodies remembering what their hearts had forgotten. You've been different lately, June said quietly, his mouth close to her ear. Dangerous. Maybe I've always been dangerous. Maybe you just never noticed. His hand slid lower on her back, possessive and probing. I notice everything about you, Aundrea. The way you've been watching me, the way you've stopped flinching when I touch you, the way you smile now, like you know something I don't. Maybe I do. Then tell me. His lips brushed her temple, his voice dropping to that dark register that used to make her weak. Tell me what game you're playing, and maybe I'll let you win. She leaned back to look at him, their faces inches apart, moving in slow circles under the chandelier light. Who says I need your permission? Something flashed in his eyes. Rage, desire, respect, maybe all three. The music swelled. The moment hung suspended between them like a blade. Then the lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage at the front of the ballroom. Jun's moment had arrived. He released her, smoothing his jacket, his mask of control sliding back into place. Wait here. She watched him walk toward the stage, watched the crowd part for him, watched him climb the stairs with the confidence of a man who believed he was invincible. Aundrea reached into her clutch. Her fingers closed around her phone. 10 seconds to decide. 10 seconds to choose mercy or justice. 10 seconds to become the stranger he'd always treated her as. Her thumb hovered over the upload command. June reached the microphone. Good evening. Thank you all for coming tonight to celebrate. Aundrea pressed the button. The screen behind June flickered. He paused mid-sentence, turning to look as the prepared slideshow, photos of the June family legacy, carefully curated images of power and prestige, glitched and died. Then the audio started. June's voice, crystal clear, clinical, the Lee boy. I want it done this week. Make it look like brake failure. Clean, no questions. Another voice, one of his lieutenants. And the shipping contracts? They transfer to us automatically once he's dead. The sister won't fight it. She doesn't know anything. The ballroom went silent. Hundreds of eyes fixed on the screen. On June, frozen at the microphone. On the evidence of murder playing out in high definition. The image shifted. Financial documents, offshore accounts, dates and dollar amounts that painted a perfect picture of embezzlement, skimming, theft from the collective syndicate pot. June's supposed betrayal, laid bare for everyone to see. Aundrea watched from her position near the dance floor as the room erupted, voices rising, accusations flying, men reaching for weapons that couldn't be drawn at a public event but hung heavy in the air nonetheless. June's eyes scanned the crowd, wild now, looking for the source, looking for the enemy. They landed on Aundrea. Understanding dawned across his face like a sunrise. Horror, betrayal, rage. She didn't look away, didn't flinch, just held his gaze across that ballroom and let him see exactly who she'd become. Then the chaos descended. Park and the northern families moving toward the stage, Bo Yoon screaming in Korean, security trying to control a situation that was already nuclear. June didn't wait for them to reach him. He jumped off the stage, pushed through the crowd, his eyes locked on Aundrea with an intensity that would have terrified her 6 months ago. Now it just felt like vindication. He reached her, grabbed her arm hard enough to bruise. What did you do? What you forced me to do. That audio, those documents, are real. Well, the audio is, the financial documents are a beautiful forgery, but your enemies don't know that. By tomorrow, every family you do business with will believe you've been stealing from them. They'll tear you apart. His grip tightened. She felt the rage vibrating through him, barely contained. You destroyed me. Over what? Your brother? He was weak. He was a liability. He was mine to protect. And you took him from me. Her voice was steel. So I'm taking everything from you. Your empire, your reputation, your power, all of it. You can't. I already have. She pulled a folded document from her clutch with her free hand. The legacy clause. Did you know my grandfather founded this whole operation? That legally if your family sheds Lee family blood, everything reverts to me? Your warehouses, Your ports, your territory. It's all mine now, Jun. You just worked here. She watched him read it, watched the color drain from his face as he realized she wasn't bluffing. This isn't real. It can't be. It's very real. Notarized. Legal. Ironclad. I had lawyers review it 3 times just to be sure. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. You treated me like a stranger. So I became one. The kind that takes everything. Around them, the ballroom had descended into chaos. Shouting, accusations, the sound of the syndicate tearing itself apart. Jun's hand moved to his jacket, to where she knew he kept his gun. She smiled. It's not loaded. I switched the magazines this morning while you were showering. You always leave your holster on the bathroom counter. Such a careless habit. His hand froze, disbelief and fury warring on his face. Federal agents are 3 blocks away, Aundrea continued calmly. Una Park, your accountant, tipped them off about the financial discrepancies. They'll be here in approximately 4 minutes. I'd suggest running, but honestly, I don't think you'll make it. The northern families look very motivated. Jun's grip on her arm loosened. He looked around like a trapped animal, searching for an exit that didn't exist. Why? The word came out broken, almost human. We were married. I gave you everything. Everything except respect. Everything except honesty. Everything except the truth about my brother. She pulled her arm free. You made me invisible, Jun. And invisible women are the most dangerous kind. We see everything, and no one sees us coming. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Jun took a step back, then another. The man who'd controlled her for 3 years, reduced to prey. I'll kill you for this, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. He was already a ghost. No, you won't, because you don't have the power anymore. I do. She turned and walked away, her burgundy dress trailing behind her like a victory banner. Behind her, she heard Jun scream her name, heard the federal agents burst through the ballroom doors, heard the empire she'd just inherited collapse into chaos. But she didn't look back. Invisible women don't need to watch their enemies fall. They already know the outcome. 6 months later, the mahogany table in the Charleston estate looked different in the morning light. Aundrea sat at its head, not the side, not as decoration, but at the head where Jun used to sit, where his father had sat, where the power had always lived. Now it was hers. The shipping contracts were spread before her. Legal, clean, transferred through the legacy clause without a single shot fired. The warehouses, the ports, the routes her grandfather had built and Jun had stolen. All returned, all legitimized, all scrubbed clean of the criminal stain that had corrupted them. She'd spent the last 6 months dismantling the syndicate piece by piece, working with federal prosecutors to flip Jun's former associates, cleaning house, building something new from the bones of something rotten. Jun himself sat in a federal detention center awaiting trial. The evidence, the real evidence, not the forgeries she'd created, had been enough to bury him. Murder, racketeering, money laundering, the list went on. Bo Yoon had fled back to Seoul. So Yoon had turned state's witness. The empire had cannibalized itself, and Aundrea had walked away with everything. Her phone buzzed. A message from her lawyer. Final papers signed. You're officially CEO. Congratulations. She set the phone down, poured herself a glass of wine. Red. Perfect. Like the dress she'd worn the night she'd ended Jun's world. The house was quiet now. No lieutenants arguing in Korean. No whispered threats. No sound of violence lurking in the corners. Just silence. And potential. And the sweet taste of victory. She thought about Jun sometimes. About the man she'd married versus the man he'd become. Or maybe he'd always been that man, and she'd just been too in love to see it. It didn't matter now. She'd learned the most important lesson this life could teach. Never underestimate the woman you made invisible. Because invisibility is just another word for camouflage. And camouflage is what predators wear. Aundrea stood, walked to the window that overlooked the Ashley River. The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of gold and blood. Charleston spread out before her like a promise, like a kingdom. Hers now, all of it. She raised her glass to the window, to her brother, wherever he was, to her grandfather, who'd been smart enough to build insurance into his empire, to herself, for being patient enough to wait and ruthless enough to strike. In the reflection of the window, She saw herself clearly for the first time in years. Not June's wife, not the stranger at the table, not the invisible woman they'd all dismissed. Just Aundrea. Strategist, survivor, queen of the South. She smiled and took a sip of wine. It tasted like freedom, like revenge, like home. If you made it this far, you witnessed a woman burn down an empire from the inside and walk away wearing the crown. Drop a comment and let me know, are you Team Aundrea or did June get what he deserved? And where are you watching from? I want to know what city is riding with this dark romance family. Hit that subscribe button because this is just the beginning. Aundrea's empire is built, but empires need defending. And in part 2, someone from June's past is coming for everything she's built. Someone who knows her secrets, someone who wants blood. Like this video if you love a revenge story that doesn't hold back. Share it with someone who needs to see what happens when you underestimate the wrong woman. And comment part 2 if you want to see what Aundrea does when the queen becomes the target. Because in Charleston, the game never really ends. It just changes players.